One might say that Ylva Wren lost everything on the night of the choosing. That is not quite right. She lost it in pieces long before. Every time she told herself that a man who would not look at her in daylight must surely have his reasons. The choosing only made it public. Varnholt would remember the public part. The hall of the Oathstone had been swept twice that day and hung with white cloth, and it still smelled of the river. Alva stood where the crown mapmakers always stood, at the back, behind the household, and the banner houses, and the long grey rink of the council. It was the correct place for her. She had measured this hall herself when she was 19, on her hands and knees with a knotted cord, and she could have told anyone that it ran 90 paces from the doors to the stone, and that the floor fell away by half a hand toward the east wall, which was why the water pooled there in spring. She noticed things like that. It was the whole of her talent, and most of her character. She noticed, for instance, that the stone was already warm. Warm since the noon bell, muttered Odo beside her. He was a runner for the map room, and he had the gift of saying the wrong thing loudly. Barrick swears he felt it through his boots. Says the hall was open half the morning. It has been open every morning this week, said Hesper on her other side. For the cleaning. Ylva said nothing. She was watching her sister. Solveig stood far forward among the banner houses, in green, with her hair braided in the old country fashion. She had come down from the northern holdings 4 months ago, and had not once stopped being the most looked-at woman in any room she entered. She had their mother's face. Ylva had their mother's hands, which was a different sort of inheritance, and a less useful one at a choosing. Solveig's fingertips were stained, a dull rust brown. To the second knuckle, mad or die, Ylva thought. She had been in the weaving rooms all week. She thought it for perhaps 2 heartbeats, and then she stopped thinking about it at all. Because the doors opened and Halvard came in. The whole hall bent. Ylva felt her own spine want to go with it, and made it stay. He had been king for 6 years, and he still walked into rooms as though he expected to be stopped at the door. Nobody in the council ever managed to see it. They saw the shoulders, and the height, and the low, unhurried voice, and they went quiet, the way people go quiet around weather. Ylva had seen him laugh so hard at his own bad drawing of a river otter that he had to put his head on her table. She knew exactly how much of the weather was real. He did not look at her. He had not looked at her in 4 days, which she had explained to herself 11 separate ways, and every one of the 11 had been generous to him. The speaker raised her hands, and the hall went still, and under the incense, there was a green crushed smell that Ylva could not place and did not have the nose to chase. By the stone, and not by the will, said the speaker. By the blood, and not by the wanting, let the king kneel. Halvard knelt. It was not supposed to take long. The king put his hands flat on the stone, and the stone found the one it found, and the whole business was over inside a minute. And afterward everyone got drunk. Dilva had drawn the seating for the feast herself, and had put herself at the 3rd table on the left, close enough to see him and far enough that nobody would think anything of it. She had done that 8 days ago, humming. He had promised her, not with the stone because no man could promise the stone, but he had held her face in both hands in the map room in the dark and said, "When it names you, I want the whole of them to hear me say your name back." The stone brightened under his palms. The light came up through the grain of it, the way light comes up through water, and it found its way out along the floor, and it went east. Ylva watched it go and felt her own heart do something absurd and hopeful because she was standing east. It stopped at Solveig. For a moment, Ylva did not understand what she was looking at. It was a mapmaker's failure, and she knew it, even as it happened. She had misread a line. She would go back and take the measurement again. The hall made a sound like a held breath, let out all at once. Halvard rose. He looked at Solveig for a long moment, and then, at last, after 4 days, he looked at Ylva. She would think about that look for years afterward, and never once get to the bottom of it. "The stone has spoken," said the speaker, delighted. Let the king answer. Say no, Ilva thought, with a clarity that frightened her. Say the thing you said in the dark. Say it is wrong, and let them tear the roof off. I answer, said Halvard. The hall broke into noise. Salvi put a hand to her mouth. Somebody was already shouting for the horns, and Odo was saying, Ilva, Ilva, hey! And Hesper had taken hold of her sleeve, and Ilva stood in the middle of all of it, and felt the 90 paces between herself and the front of that room stretch out into something no cord could measure. Then she walked them. She did not decide to. Oz. She was simply moving, and the banner houses were parting for her, the way people part for something they cannot classify. And then she was standing in front of her king, with her hands at her sides. Ilva, he said, very low, not here. I have a question, Ilva. You are relieved, she said. It came out flat and clear, and it carried, which she had not intended, and the hall went quiet in rings spreading outward from where she stood. That is what I saw in your face, she said. Not grief, relief. You have been afraid for 2 years that you would have to choose me in front of these people, that you would have to stand up in this hall and tell every house in Varnholt that their king wanted the map girl with the ink on her hands, and defend it, and keep defending it for the rest of your life. Her voice did not shake, which she was distantly proud of. And tonight, the stone did it for you. Tonight, you get to be a man who had no choice. You will be sad about it beautifully. Everyone will say how bravely he bore it. Nobody in that hall breathed. That is not true, said Halvard. Then say the other thing. She looked up at him. Did you ever feel it at all? Not what you owed me, not what you enjoyed. Did you ever, once, feel the thing you are about to promise her? He opened his mouth. She saw the first shape of the word begin, and she never learned what it was, because the horns went up outside the east wall and the oath bell came down over the top of them, like a hand over her mouth. And the speaker was calling the right closed, and the household surged in between them. And the king of Varnholt was carried away from her on the tide of his own good fortune. Elva woke at the 4th bell with the absolute conviction that she had dreamed it, and lay there for a while enjoying that, and then remembered the 90 paces. The map room was cold. She had walked out of the hall, and down the 2 flights, and sat on her own stool, at her own slanted table, until the candle went out, and then put her head on the table, and slept there like an animal. There was ink on her cheek. She caught herself checking, and had to put both hands flat on the wood and breathe. She lives, said Hesper from the doorway. Go away. No. Hesper came in and set down a covered bowl and a cup. And behind her, Odo hovered with the expression of a man delivering bad weather. Eat that! You have not eaten since yesterday noon, and I counted. You did not count. I counted. Dilva sat up. Her back had locked into the shape of the table. Say it then. Hesper and Odo traded a look, and that look was worse than anything they went on to tell her. It is being said, Hesper began carefully, that you crossed the whole hall to shout at the king. I did not shout. I know. I was there. It has improved in the telling. How improved? By the wine tables last night you had struck him, said Odo. By the stables this morning you had drawn on him. Beric has you dragged off by 4 men of the household guard. There were no men. There were no men, Odo agreed miserably. But it is a better story with the men. Ilva discovered that her hands were shaking, and hid them in her lap. It was not the shame, or not only, it was that she could hear herself. You are relieved. She could hear the flatness of it, and the 90 paces of silence she had set it into, and the fact that every word of it had been true, and that truth was not a defense against anything. And my sister, she said. Confined to the queen's rooms until the seating, said Hesper. As is proper, she has sent for her boxes from the north. She sent for those 2 days ago, said Odo, and then, at Hesper's face. What? She did. Beric carried the letter. Elva looked up. It sat there in front of her, small and square and wrong. The way a hill sits wrong on a map when the man who surveyed it has copied the shape from the wrong sheet. 2 days ago, before the choosing, she turned it over and got nothing useful, and put it down, because there was a knock at the door and Skell came in without waiting for an answer. And Skell never did that. He was 70 and he had run the map room for 40 of those years. And he had found Ylva at 13 in the yard of the tannery in Brindlemore, copying the road boards onto a scrap of hide with a burnt stick, and he had bought her indenture with his own coin and never once mentioned it since. She had seen that folded chart of a face through 3 bad winters and a fire, and a season when the plague came up the river, and had never once seen it look the way it looked now. He was frightened. "Out," he said to Hesper and Odo, and they went. "Master Skell, sit down. You are sitting. Good." He put his hands on the back of the stool opposite and did not sit himself. "You will not like the next thing I say. You have to leave the walls. I am not going to apologize for what I said. It was true. I know it was true. That is the trouble." He closed his eyes briefly. "Girl, listen to me. There is an old writing. Nobody has needed it in 90 years, and every house in this hall knows it by heart. This morning, when a stone names a queen, no woman inside the walls may stand where the naming might be doubted. Not her sister, not her rival. Not a woman who walked 90 paces in front of the whole realm and asked the king out loud whether he had ever wanted her. They can doubt what they like. They can put you out," said Skell. "That is the mildest of it. If it goes badly, they can put you out with a mark on you, and no house from here to the coast will take on a marked mapmaker, and you will be back in the tannery yard by the first frost with a burnt stick." His voice cracked on the last of it, and he steadied it, furious with himself. "I did not spend 40 years teaching you to draw a coastline, so you could go back to Brindlemore." Ylva sat very still. "How long do I have?" 9 days, he straightened. "I have written to Austri. They are always short of surveyors and they do not care what a woman said in somebody else's hall. It is a good post, Ylva. It is a better post than this one. And I take it because I have been ordered out. You take it because you are the best hand I have ever trained," said Skell, "and because I am an old man who would like to sleep at night. Go and pack." He left. Ylva sat where she was for a long time. Then she reached over and pulled her own working calendar toward her. It was not a calendar the way the court kept calendars. It was a strip of good hide, marked off in the small precise ticks she used for everything. Because a surveyor who cannot count days cannot count anything. She used it for the river levels. She used it for the frost. She used it because she was a creature of habit and had been since she was 13, for herself. She found the last mark. She counted forward, and then, because she did not believe the answer, she counted again with the flat of her thumb, tick by tick, the way she would have checked a shoreline. The room went strange and bright at the edges. 9 days, Skell had said. Ylva put down the calendar and put both hands over her mouth and made no sound at all. She was still sitting like that when the horns went up on the east wall. Not the oath bell this time. 3 long calls and a short one, which meant a crowned arrival, which meant somebody had come through the outer gate without the household knowing far enough ahead to argue about it. Ylva was on her feet before she had decided to be. Old habit. When the horns went, the map room got asked where the roads were. By the time she reached the yard, half the palace was there, and none of it knew what to do with itself. They had come up the west road in the rain, 50 riders and no baggage train, under a banner Ylva had drawn 11 times for the treaty charts and had never once seen in the flesh, grey, with a white hound cochon. "They were not expected till the seating," said Odo, appearing at her elbow wet through. "Nobody has beds for 50. The man at the front of them swung down before anyone could get a step to him, which Ylva noticed, because kings did not usually deprive people of the pleasure of the step. He was younger than she had expected from the charts. Dark, plain, in the way that expensive things are sometimes plain. He handed his reins to a boy of his own household and looked around the yard with an expression of mild scholarly interest, as though he had come to price the flagstones, Halvard came out onto the steps. Dilva had not seen him since the hall. She looked at him and her whole body did something humiliating and hot, and she stood very still until it passed, and it did not entirely pass. "Oven," said Halvard, "you are 9 days early. Forgive me." King Ovan of Austria came up the steps unhurried. "I am told there was a choosing." "There was, and it went as these things go." Ovan smiled slightly. "Congratulations. Of course my mother's people have a saying about the stone. It is not a kind saying, so I will not repeat it in your yard." Somebody at the back of the crowd laughed and turned it into a cough. "You will want the east wing," said Halvard. "It is not aired. It will do." "We slept in a barn at Gallows Reach, and the roof was a rumor." Oven turned and looked out over the yard. "Before that, I am told a woman of your household is being put out under the old writing. The map maker." Ylva felt the whole weight of it swing round onto her, and she did the only thing she had left, which was to stand up straight in her wet coat with her ink-stained hands at her sides. "That is a matter for Varnholt," said Halvard. And there was something under his voice now, some low, warning thing that had not been there a moment before. "It would be," said Oven pleasantly, "except that she is not yours to put out." Oven. Her mother's mother was Aud of Brindlemore, who kept the hearth at the Austria house on the river road for 11 years, and who was given the hearth debt in writing by my grandfather. And the hearth debt runs in the female line and does not lapse. Oven said all of this in the tone of a man reading out a laundry list, which makes this woman sworn to my house before she was ever sworn to yours. You cannot mark her. You cannot put her out. You can, at most, ask me nicely to take her away, which, as it happens, I intend to do. Ylva stood in the rain with her heart going like a bird against a window. There was no hearth debt. Her grandmother had been called Aud, and she had indeed come from Brindlemore, and she had scrubbed floors in 3 houses on the river road, and had died of a cough at 41. And there was no writing anywhere in the world with her name on it. Alva knew that the way she knew the fall of the floor in the hall of the Oathstone. He was lying, in front of 200 people, calmly, in the rain. This man was lying about her dead grandmother. She looked at him and found that he was already looking at her, and there was nothing at all in his face to read. "Is this true?" said Halvard. He was not asking Oven, he was asking her. And there it was, the second gift of the week, laid down in front of her, like a plank over water. Say no, and she was a mapmaker, with 9 days, and a mark and a tannery yard. Say yes, and she was a liar in front of the whole realm, and out of the walls, and gone. Say yes, and nobody in Varnholt would ever have cause to count on their fingers. "It is true," said Ylva. She heard her own voice come out steady, and she was distantly amazed by it. She did not look at Halvard when she said it. She looked at the wet stones. And then, because she was not entirely a coward, she made herself look up. Whatever she expected to find in his face, it was not that. "Then it seems I am to lose 2 of your household in a week," said Oven. "Get her dry. We ride the day after tomorrow." He went in. The yard came apart into 40 separate arguments about beds. They put her in a small aired room in the east wing with a fire, which was more than the map room had ever run to, and she stood in front of it and shook so hard her teeth clicked. She had 8 hours to work out what she was going to say to him. She built it carefully. Thank you would not do. Why would not do either? Because it handed him the whole of her. She had settled on something cool and even and grateful when the door opened and Oven came in with a cup of hot wine in each hand and put one down on the table beside her, without offering it, and went and sat in the chair by the fire as though the room were his, which it was. "You did not tell them I was lying," he said. "That was well done. Most people cannot resist correcting a lie in their own favor." Ylva's careful sentence went out of her head entirely. "Why?" she said. Oven looked into the fire. "Drink that," he said. "You are going to want to be warm for the next part." They rode out the day after tomorrow, as he had said, in a grey drizzle that never once became rain. Ylva had a horse of her own, which was new, and a coat of Austri gray that fit across the shoulders and nowhere else, and a wooden case strapped behind her saddle, holding 4 rules, 2 compasses, a case of gall ink, and the only 3 charts in the world that were entirely hers. She had left everything else. She had not gone to the map room to say goodbye to Skell, because he had come to the East Wing at dawn and put his hand on the back of her neck, the way he had when she was 13, and said, "Write to me, girl," and had gone away again before she could answer. At the top of the West Road, she turned in the saddle and looked back at Varnholt once. Then she did not do it again. Owen rode at the front for the first hour and dropped back to her somewhere after the second. He did it without ceremony, the way he did everything, and for a while he simply rode beside her and said nothing at all, which she found she minded less than she expected. "You have not asked me again," he said eventually. "You did not answer the first time. I did not. I wanted you over the border first." He watched the road. "Ask, why did you lie for me?" "Because you are carrying," said Owen. Ilva's hands closed on the reins hard enough to hurt. She had known, for 2 days. She had told nobody. She had walked through the yard in the rain and stood in front of a fire and eaten dinner at a strange man's table and had spoken to 7 separate people, and not one of them had looked at her twice. "How? I am a wolf, and you were standing upwind in a wet coat," said Owen. "It is not a mystery. It is a smell." He glanced across at her briefly. "It will not be a mystery to anyone else either in about 10 weeks. Which is why we are on this road. Say the rest of it. You know the rest of it. Say it. Anyway, I want to hear whether it sounds as bad out loud." Owen was quiet for a moment. "The blood of a crowned alpha belongs to his house," he said. "Not to the mother. That is the writing in Varnholt, and in half the realms on this coast. And it has never once been read in a woman's favor. If you had stayed inside those walls and swelled up under the Queen's own window, they would have taken it off you the hour it was born, and you would never have learned where it went. He let that sit. Your sister is going to have sons. She will not want your child standing anywhere near them holding the older claim. Salve would not. You believe that? I have believed it my whole life," said Ilva. "It has been useful," Owen laughed. "Once without much in it. Now you are in Austria, and in Austria the writing is different, and I am the man who reads it aloud." They rode a while. "The stone was warm," said Ilva. "What?" "Before the rite. It had been warm since the noon bell. A man called Beric felt it through his boots, and half the hall heard him say, 'So.'" She was not looking at Owen. She was looking at the grey road going up into the grey country. The hall had been open all morning for the cleaning. "And there was a smell under the incense that I could not place. Green, crushed, like something bruised in a hand." Owen said nothing, for long enough that she turned her head. "Say it," she said. "I am a guest of Varnholt for another 2 days, and I have 40 men on this road. Say it anyway." "Firethorn," said Owen. "The root, not the berry. Boiled down it goes rust-colored, and it stains whatever it touches, and it will carry a scent for about a day and a half, and there is exactly one thing on this earth that anybody boils it for." He looked straight ahead. "My grandfather hanged 2 men for it. It is not a subtle trick. It is only that nobody in a hall full of celebrating people is standing there smelling for it." Ilva thought about her sister's fingers, stained to the second knuckle. Matter die, she had thought. 2 heartbeats, and then she had stopped thinking about it, because the doors had opened. "You are quiet," said Owen. "I am counting something." "Count it slowly," he said. "You are 4 days from the border. Whatever number you arrive at, you cannot spend it here." They came down out of the pass at Gallows Reach on the 4th day, and the country opened in front of her, and Ilva forgot for 11 whole minutes to be frightened. She had drawn this 3 times from other men's field books and had always suspected the men. There was the river, and it did not go where the treaty chart said it went. There was the coast road, a full league inland of where every copy in Varnholt put it. She heard herself make a small, outraged noise. "Problem," said Owen. "Your charts are wrong." Somebody sat down and drew them wrong on purpose, or drew them wrong from laziness. And I would like to know which. She was up in the stirrups now, shading her eyes. Who surveyed your coast? A man called Torgir, 40 years ago, from a boat. From a boat. He was frightened of the cliffs. Then he should not have been a surveyor, said Ylva with feeling. And Oven put his head back and laughed properly for the first time since she had met him, and several of his riders turned round to look at their king. They gave her the old chart house on the harbor wall, 2 rooms and a leaking roof, and the best north light she had ever stood in, and by midwinter she had a stove, an apprentice and the coast road redrawn as far as the salt flats. Nobody in Austria asked her about Varnholt. Ovan had made it known, quietly, that nobody would. The children came at the turn of the year, in the small hours, in a room that smelled of tallow and wet stone. There were 2 of them. Nobody had told her there would be 2. The midwife had said the child sat oddly, and Ylva had assumed the child sat oddly, and then there was a boy, and then, some considerable time later, when Ylva had already gone somewhere far past the end of herself, there was a girl. She lay afterward with one in the crook of each arm and looked at them and understood, in a plain and unfrightened way, that everything she had been before that night had been a rough draft. The boy, she called Bram. The girl she called Rilla. Oven came on the second day, and stood in the doorway with his hands behind his back like a man at an inspection. You may come in, said Ylva. They are not going to bite you. They have no teeth. He came in. He looked down at the 2 of them for a long time, and something happened behind his face that she could not read at all. And then he said, There is a difficulty. There is a roof full of holes and a girl who will not take the breast. Pick one. A legal difficulty. He sat down on the stool by the bed. A child born in Austria with no father named is a child any house may petition for. It is an old kindness for orphans, and it has been an old cruelty for about 90 years. If a house petitions and the mother cannot name a father, the child goes. Ylva went very cold. Then I name him. You name the crowned Alpha of Varnholt, said Oven. And within a month there is a rider on that harbor wall with a writing in his hand. And the writing will be in order, because your sister's household will have spent good money making sure of it. He leaned forward. So we do not name him, we name somebody else. Ylva looked at him. You, she said. Me. That is a lie. So large, I cannot see the edges of it. It is a lie, the size of a kingdom. And I have the kingdom, said Oven. It costs you nothing, and it buys those 2, the only thing that matters, which is that nobody can come and take them. He paused. It is not a marriage. I am not asking for your bed, and I am not asking for your gratitude. I am asking to stand up in my own hall and say a sentence. Why? Because I can, he said. And she knew even then, lying there with an infant asleep on either arm, that it was not the whole answer, and that she was going to say yes anyway. He stood up in the great hall of Austria on the 9th day of the new year, in front of his council and his household and the 4 banner houses of the coast, and he put one hand flat on the hearthstone. Ylva stood to the side with a bundle in each arm, waiting for somebody to laugh, or object, or point at her, and say the obvious thing. Nobody did. The 4 houses stood there in their good coats, and watched their childless king put his hand on a stone, and Ylva understood that every person in that hall had already decided to want this. These are my children, said King Ovan. Bram and Rilla of Austria. Let it be written. It was written. It was witnessed. The hall drank to it. Afterward, in the passage, the old law-keeper of Austria stopped her with a hand like paper. You will want to know what you have just done, he said. Nobody ever does, and then they come to me in 10 years. A naming at the hearthstone cannot be unsaid. Not by him, not by you, not by any writing out of any hall on this coast. He blinked up at her mildly. It is older than the crown, so the crown cannot reach it. People think a king may undo whatever a king does. A king may undo almost everything, madam. Not that. Ylva looked down at the two sleeping faces and told herself that a lie which could not be unsaid was only a stronger sort of shelter. And in the spring, when the passes opened, 3 riders came up the coast road under no banner at all and stopped at the border house at Gallows Reach and asked the warden, very politely, whether he had seen a woman from Varnholt with ink on her hands and a child. 5 years is nothing on a chart. It is one line of small writing in the corner, giving the year of the survey. 5 years is a great deal of everything else. Brom woke first, always, and woke his sister on principle, and by the time Ylva came down, the two of them had got the stove open and the floor covered in cold ash, and were arguing about whose fault it was, in the flat, furious voices of people who had been alive for 5 years and were fluent in injustice. Hers. You are both black to the elbow, said Ylva. Brom, hands. Rilla, do not put that in your mouth. I know what you are thinking. Hands. They had her mother's face, both of them, which had been a strange thing to get used to. They had a great deal else besides. Rilla had a way of standing with her weight on one hip and her chin down when she was told off that Ylva had seen exactly once before in a hall 90 paces long, and the first time she caught it, she had to go and stand in the yard. Bram had the eyes. There was no help for the eyes. Nobody in Austria said so. Austria had decided, collectively and without ever discussing it, that the Chartmaster's twins were the kings, and that the whole business was slightly scandalous and entirely settled. Ylva had stopped correcting it in the second year. She had never once said it either. The chart house had 6 rooms now and a new roof, and 4 apprentices and a wall of drawers running the length of the north side. On the long table lay the coast in 12 sheets, every sounding taken twice, every headland walked. It was the best work anyone had done on that shore in 400 years, and Owen had made her chartmaster in a ceremony that lasted 90 seconds because she had asked him to keep it short. He came most evenings, the way people come who have nowhere in particular they would rather be, which for a king is the rarest thing there is. That evening he came with a bag of roasted nuts and let Rilla go through his pockets for them, while Bram explained to him at enormous length about a dead crab. It had a whole leg gone, said Bram. That is very serious. It had a whole leg gone, and Rilla poked it. With a stick, said Rilla, from inside his coat. Ah, said Owen, with a stick is different. A stick is respectful. Can we go back tomorrow? To the crab. To the crab, said Bram. Because I want to see if the other legs come off. That is the most Austry thing anybody has said to me this year, said Owen, and I include my counsel. Ylva watched from the table, with her rule still in her hand, and let herself have it, the way she did, perhaps once a month. The lamplight, the 2 dark heads, the man on the floor being robbed of nuts by a 5-year-old. She had built this, out of nothing but a lie and a fast horse. Later, when they had been put upstairs and had stopped shouting and started that low conspiratorial murmuring that meant nobody was going to sleep for a while, Owen poured 2 cups and sat down across from her. Say it, he said. I have not said anything. You have been going to ask something for about 2 months. You get a particular line between your eyes, and then you go and measure something. He drank. Ask. Ylva put down her rule. Why did you really do it? She said. Not the yard, not the hall. Why does a king put 2 children, who are not his, into his own line, in writing, in front of 4 banner houses, for a woman he had known for 1 day? Owen turned the cup slowly on the table. I had a son, he said. Ylva went still. Arn. His mother was called. He was 2. He said it evenly. The way you say a thing you have said to yourself 10,000 times so that it will hold still. The coughing sickness came up the coast. In the year before I went to your choosing. It took them both inside a fortnight. It took a great many people. It was not a special grief. It was the common one. There were houses on that harbour wall that lost 4. Owen, let me finish. I have started. He set the cup down. I cannot get another. That was made plain to me by 3 physicians, and I have chosen to believe the third one because he was the only one who did not want paying twice, so Austria ends with me. And when Austria ends, the coast is opened up like a purse, and the 4 banner houses go to war over it, and then whoever wins goes to Varnholt on their knees to be protected. And there is no more Austria, and there are no more of my people, there are only somebody else's people, living in the same weather. He looked up. And then a man. I did not much like rejected a woman in a hall, in front of 200 witnesses, he said. And I stood in his yard and smelled that she was carrying his heirs, and I thought, there it is. There is the whole of it. Standing in the rain in a wet coat, Ilva discovered that she was not angry. She examined that finding twice, because it surprised her. So you used me, she said. Yes, you said it very quickly. Because it is true, and I have never once pretended otherwise, and because the other half is also true. Owen spread his hands. I meant to buy a line. I did not expect to be robbed of nuts every evening by a small tyrant in a good coat. I did not expect any of the rest of it. And I will tell you plainly, Ilva, if I could go back and choose again between the kingdom and those 2 upstairs, I would not choose the kingdom, and that frightens me, because I am supposed to be a serious man. Ilva sat there for a while. Then she picked up her cup and touched it against his, which was not a thing she had ever done. Your river is still wrong on the treaty copies, she said. Woman, it has been 5 years. It will be wrong for 400 more, if somebody does not sit down and correct it. And I have sat down. He laughed, and the sound went up the stairs, and above them, the low murmuring stopped for a moment to listen, and then started again. It was, Ilva thought afterward, the last completely good evening. The letter came on the 3rd day of the spring, sealed in grey, from the harbour master. Varnholt was sending a treaty party for the fishing rights, 40 riders, arriving in a fortnight. At the bottom, in the harbour master's cramped and apologetic hand, was the part he had clearly not wanted to write. The king rides with them. They cleaned the hall for 9 days. Ilva helped, because the alternative was standing still. She had thought about taking the twins up the coast to the salt flats for a month, and had got as far as packing a case before she understood that she would be teaching them at 5 years old that they were something to be hidden. She had thought about telling them. She had opened her mouth to do it twice. What she had not managed to think about, in 9 days of thinking, was the actual sight of him. He came in under the grey and the white hound with the rain still on his shoulders, and Ilva stood at the back of the hall, where the household stood, which was the correct place for her, and discovered that her body had learned nothing at all in 6 years. He was thinner, he had the same unhurried way of coming into a room, and it did not sit on him properly any more, like a coat gone loose. There was grey at his temple that had no business being there in a man of 39. He was looking down the hall for something before his boots had stopped moving. Halvard of Varnholt, said the herald. Owen of Austria, said Owen, and did not come down off the dais. You are welcome. Your rooms are aired this time. Something that was almost a smile went across Halvard's face and died there. Austria, we will do the fish tomorrow. Tonight you will eat, and your men will sleep. I am told the pass is bad. The pass is a river. It always is in the spring. Whoever charted it put the road on the wrong side of the fall line. Owen turned his head slightly. My chart master has been threatening to move it for 3 years, and Ilva watched the exact moment the words reached him. Halvard's head came round. He found her at the back of the hall, in Austria grey, with her hands at her sides. She had imagined this in every register she had available. She had never once imagined that he would look like a man who had been shot. He took a step toward her. He got one. Because that was the moment the side door banged open the way it banged open every single evening at that hour, and 2 children came through it at a dead run, arguing. He said, I could not. She cannot. She is smaller. I am 4 minutes smaller. They saw the strangers. They stopped dead in the middle of the hall of Ostry with 40 riders of Varnholt looking at them. And Rilla did the thing with her chin. And Bram, who was 5 and had the eyes, and did not know what he had, looked straight up at Halvard of Varnholt with them. Nobody in the hall moved. "Ah," said Owen into the silence easily, exactly as though nothing at all were happening. "Forgive me. Bram, Rilla, come and be looked at." They came, because they always came. Rilla arrived first and attached herself to his leg. Bram came at a slower and more dignified pace, because there were soldiers, and one did not run in front of soldiers. Owen put one hand on each dark head. "These are my children," he said. It landed in that hall like a stone into a well. Ilva watched it go into Halvard, and she saw every part of the journey. She saw him hear the sentence. She saw him look down at the boy, and at the boy's eyes, and she saw the arithmetic start, and she saw the exact instant it finished, because the color went out of his face, all at once, from the jaw upward, the way water leaves sand. "Your children," said Halvard, "named and written in this hall, on the 9th day of the new year." "5 years past," said Owen, "witnessed by my council, my household, and the 4 houses of the coast. It is in the book. You are welcome to read it. Most people find the handwriting poor. Owen, ask your lawkeeper. You have brought one. You always do." Owen had not raised his voice at any point, and did not now. "He will tell you what mine told me. A naming at the hearthstone is older than either of our crowns, and neither of our crowns can reach it. It is not a claim, Halvard. A claim can be contested. It is a fact, in the way that a river is a fact." Down the hall, a gray-haired man in Varnholt colors had gone the particular shade of a servant who has been asked a question in public and knows the answer. Halvard did not look at him. He did not need to. Ylva watched him decide not to look, and watched what it cost. "They are also 5, said Owen, "and they have been on their feet since before the light, and they are about to be extremely rude to somebody, so I am going to send them to bed." Hesper. Ylva had not even seen Hesper come in. She had followed 6 months after the crossing, arriving on the harbor wall with 2 bags and an opinion about the weather. And she came forward now and took a hand each and steered them out, and Rilla waved at the soldiers. And one of the soldiers waved back before he remembered himself. The door closed. "Sit down and eat," said Owen. "We will do the fish tomorrow." Nobody ate very much. He came to the chart house at the 4th bell, which she had known he would, and she had left the door unbarred, which she was going to have to examine at some later date when she had the strength. He stood in her north light with the rain coming off him, and looked at the 12 sheets of the coast laid out on the long table, and for a moment he was so exactly the man who had put his head down on her table, laughing at a badly drawn otter, that Ylva had to hold on to the back of a chair. "How old are they?" he said. "You did the counting in the hall? I watched you do it, Ylva." 5 years and 1 season. Halvard closed his eyes. "Say it," she said. "You have ridden 4 days. Say the thing. Are they mine?" "No," said Ylva. He flinched as though she had hit him. "They were yours for 1 night 6 years ago," she said, "and after that they were mine, and then they were his. And that is not a punishment, Halvard. That is only the order things happened in. You lost the claim in the hall. You did not lose it to Owen. You put it down yourself, and walked away from it, and answered the stone. I did not know. No, you did not. I was going to tell you at the feast." Her voice was perfectly level, and she hated it. "I had a table drawn, 3rd from the front on the left, Ylva. Do you want to know what I did instead? I sat on a stool in the map room until the candle went out. And then a man I had never met stood in your yard in the rain and lied to your face about my dead grandmother, and I let him, because it was the only roof anybody had offered me." She heard her own voice climb and pulled it down. "You would have taken them, not you personally. Your house, your writing, your queen, and the difference between those things and you is a difference I stopped being able to afford on the night of the choosing. You think I would have let them touch you. I think you let the stone touch me," said Ylva. "And you were in the room." He put both hands on the edge of her table and leaned on it, and for a moment she thought he was simply going to go. "I wrote to you," he said. Ylva stopped. "What?" "I wrote to you." He looked up. "For 4 years. Every month at first and then whenever I could not stand it, which was oftener, and opt. I sent them to the chart house on the harbor wall at Ostry, because that was the only direction anyone would give me. 91 letters." His mouth twisted. "Some of them were not even about you. There was a season I could not sleep, and I wrote to you about the grain rolls. I have no idea why. I suppose I wanted one person in the world who would have told me the truth about them. Halvard, I stopped last spring. I decided a woman who does not answer 91 letters has answered, and that I had earned it. And that, continuing, was a kind of cruelty to both of us." He straightened slowly. "I have thought about that decision every day since. I would like you to know that I did not stop, because I stopped wanting to write." The room had gone very quiet and very far away. Ylva looked at the wall of drawers running the whole length of the north side. 6 years of everything that had ever come into this house, sorted and dated and filed by her own hand. "Halvard," she said, "I have never had a letter from you in my life. The chart house kept everything. That was not sentiment. It was method. Every sheet that came into that building was dated on the reverse, in Ylva's own hand, filed by year in the long drawers on the north wall, and cross-written into a receiving book, because a chart house that cannot say where a thing came from is a chart house full of rumors." She had made the rule in her first winter. Her apprentices complained about it constantly. She went through 6 years of it in one night, and by the third bell she had what she needed, which was nothing at all. Not one letter under seal from Varnholt, not one entry in the receiving book. A thing that never arrives leaves no mark, which is exactly what makes it so easy to do. So she stopped looking for the letters and started looking for the road. Everything that came into Ostry came through the harbor master, who was a careful man with poor handwriting and who kept a tally of the incoming post bags by house and by year. She was at his door when he opened it at dawn. "Varnholt," she said, "every year." Now he gave her the tallies without a word, which told her he had waited 5 years for somebody to ask. They were there. A gray bag from Varnholt in the spring, and another in the autumn every year, signed for at the harbor and turned round on the same tide, and against every one of them, in the column for the receiving hand, the same mark. Not her mark. Not the chart house mark. The crown map room of Varnholt used a small figure for its own dispatches. A compass rose with the north point broken. Skell had drawn it on the first flyleaf she ever owned. She had spent 4 years as a girl trying to copy it, and never once got the broken point right. It was on every line. The letters had come 4 days over water, to the bottom of her own hill, and a Varnholt courier had signed them back into a Varnholt boat, and not one of them had ever gone up. She found him in the hall an hour later, alone at the long table with the treaty chart spread in front of him, doing what he had done every morning for 50 years, which was correcting somebody else's work in a beautiful hand. He looked up, and his whole folded face opened, the way it had opened at the tannery yard in Brindlemoor when a girl showed him a road drawn on hide with a burnt stick. "There she is," said Skell. Ylva put the tallies on the table. She watched the light go out of him. It did not take long, and he did not try to stop it. And that was the worst part of the entire morning. "Say it out loud," she said. "I took them, all of them, every one." He folded his hands. "The first came before the boy and girl were a month old. I read it. Then I read the second, and I did not read any of the rest, because a man who cannot read a thing has no business handling it. And I handled it anyway for 4 years. Why, because a letter answered is a road home," said Skell. "And I had spent 1 winter working out what waited at the end of that road for you. You had no right. None whatever. You do not even argue." Her voice cracked, and she was furious about it. "You are the one thing in my life that was never a lie. You bought my indenture. You taught me the North Light. You put your hand on my neck at dawn. and told me to write to you, and I did. Skell, I wrote to you 4 times a year for 6 years. And every single time I did, I was writing to a man who was going through my post. Yes, look at me. He looked at her. There were tears going down the folds of that face, and he made no attempt at all to deal with them. I have no defense that would satisfy you, he said. Only the arithmetic. If you had answered him in the first year, he would have come in the open, because that is the sort of fool he is. And your sister would have known inside a fortnight that there were 2 children on this coast with the older claim. He put a hand flat on the table. Whatever you are angry at me for, it is not as bad as what I was frightened of. That was not your choice to make. No, said Skell, it was yours. I took it. I would take it again, and I would be as sorry as this again. And both of those things are true, and I am too old to pretend they cancel. Ilva picked up the tallies with hands that were not working properly. There is one more thing you should have, said Skell, and then you should go and not come back, because I do not think I can do this twice. She waited. Think about the harbor, he said. A gray bag comes off a Varnholt boat twice a year and goes straight back onto it, under the eye of the harbor master, and the harbor master answers to the man who runs this coast. 4 years, Ilva. Twice a year, for 4 years. And nobody ever asked me a single question about it. The floor of the Hall of Ostry seemed to move very slightly. You are saying he knew. I am saying I never once had to hide. She found Owen on the harbor wall in the wind, with his hands behind his back, watching the boats come in, and he turned before she reached him because he had heard her coming, and something in his face told her he had known this conversation was on its way since the moment Halvard rode into his yard. Ask it, he said. Do not. Her voice came out of her like something torn. Do not do the thing where you make it easy. You do not get that. Very well. 91 letters. 4 years. Did you know? The wind went on, doing what the wind does. Say the rest of it, said Ilva. I want to hear whether it sounds as bad out loud. It sounds worse. He did not look away from her, which she would think about later. Skell came to me in the first spring. He told me what he intended and why. I could have stopped him with one sentence, and I did not say the sentence. Because of the coast, because of the 4 houses, because Ostry ends with you. Because of all of that, said Owen, and because if you had gone home, they would have gone with you. They, Ilva laughed, and it came out wrong. Say their names, Ram and Rilla. You do not get to say their names in that sentence. She was shaking now, all through. I have defended you in my own head for 6 years. Every time somebody in that town smirked about the chartmaster and the king, I told myself, no, that man asked for nothing. That man is the one honest thing that ever happened to me. And you stood in a hall with your hand on a stone and said, my children, in front of 4 banner houses, and I let you, and you were already reading my post. Ilva, you took 5 years from me. Yes, said Owen. And I would give you back every one of them if the giving were a thing that could be done. And it is not. And I have known that since the day I did it. He took 1 step and stopped when she moved. I have never lied to you. Not once, from the yard onward, I did not tell you this. Those are not the same, and I am aware that at this particular moment, you do not care. I do not care. No, you could have told me any evening. You sat on my floor, with my son going through your pockets. Something in Owen's face came apart then, briefly, and he put it back. That is why, he said. That is the whole answer, and it is not a good one. Because every evening I did not tell you was another evening I got to sit on that floor. Ilva looked at the man who had saved her life and stolen 5 years of it with the same pair of hands, and found there was nothing left in her at all. Do not come to the chart house, she said. Ilva, please, let me at least. She was already walking. Solvi arrived at the turn of the week, in green, with 60 riders and a wagon of boxes entirely unannounced. Ilva watched her come up the harbor road from the north window and felt something in her chest go quiet and cold and useful, the way it went before a long survey. Her sister found her that afternoon in the chart house, alone, and did it beautifully. She came in without knocking. She looked around at the drawers and the north light and the 12 sheets of the coast and said, "Oh, Ilva, all of this, you clever thing," in a voice with real warmth in it. And Ilva remembered with a lurch that the warmth had always been real. That was what nobody ever understood about Solvi. "Sit down," said Solvi. "I have come to help you, and you are going to hate me for it. I doubt it will be a new experience. He has a writing." Solvi let that fall and watched it land. "Havard. He carries a seizure writing for the boy and girl, sealed by his own counsel. He signed it at the border house at Gallows Reach on the way out, 2 nights before he rode into this yard in front of his lawkeeper and 2 witnesses. I was told by a man who stood in the room." Ilva did not move. "Owen cannot stop it," Solveig went on. "Gentle, relentless. The naming will not hold against a crowned alpha's own blood claim. Whatever that old creature in the passage told you, Austria will not go to war over a mapmaker's twins." She reached across and took Ilva's hand, and her hand was warm too. "There is one thing that stops it. Stand up in that hall and say, 'He got those children on you, by a promise he never meant to keep, and cast you off when it was done.' Say it, and no house on this coast will let him near them again. And you would be free of him, and I would be free of him," Solvi agreed, without a flicker. "I am not going to insult you by pretending otherwise. We can both have what we want, for once, at the same time. Say yes." Ilva looked at her sister's warm hand on her own. Then she said, "Let me think until the evening bell," and Solveig kissed her cheek and went away pleased. Dilva waited until the door shut, then she got out the pass. She had drawn Gallows Reach herself in her 2nd year, and walked it twice since, and she had the field book, and she had the notes she had made in the spring the year Bram broke his wrist, 2 nights before he rode into this yard. The border house sat 4.5 days from the harbor of Ostray, in good weather, and this had not been good weather. A rider who signed a writing there on the night Solveig described would have arrived in the yard of Ostray somewhere around the following autumn. Ilva sat with her thumb on the fall line for a long time. Her sister had not lied about a feeling or a motive which cannot be checked. Her sister had lied about a distance. That was very poor work. The hall was full that evening because both councils were in it, and the 4 houses of the coast, and every servant who could invent a reason to be near a door. Solvi stood up and did it perfectly. She was grieved. She was reluctant. She had learned something on this coast that she could not in conscience carry home, and she asked, with her hands open, that her sister be allowed to speak, because her sister loved the King of Varnholt, and would have every reason to protect him, and so what her sister said could be trusted. Ilva stood up. She looked at Halvard, who had gone the color of the table, and who thought, she could see it plainly, that she had come to finish him. "I am sorry," she told him without a word. "I should have measured you sooner." "There is no seizure writing," said Ilva. The hall stopped. "My sister says it was signed at the border house at Gallows Reach, 2 nights before the King of Varnholt arrived in this yard. I surveyed that pass. I have the field book here, and I will lay it in front of any man who wants to check my arithmetic." She put it on the table. "The border house is 4.5 days from that door, in dry weather, and it has been a river for a fortnight. Nobody signs a writing at Gallows Reach on a Tuesday, and stands in this hall on a Thursday. It cannot be done on a fast horse. It cannot be done on 4 fast horses. It is not a lie about a man, my lords. It is a lie about a road, and a road can be walked." Somebody in the Varnholt party said, very clearly, "The pass was a river. We swam the 2nd ford," and somebody else told him to be quiet. "Ilva," said Solveig, "there is more, and you should let me get through it, because I have been carrying it for 6 years and it is heavy." Ilva turned to the Council of Varnholt. The oath stone was warm 4 hours before the choosing. A man of your household called Beric said, so out loud in front of a hall full of people, and every one of them forgot it inside the hour because the horns went up. The hall had stood open all morning for the cleaning. There was a green crushed smell under the incense that nobody could place. She let that sit. Firethorn root, said Ilva, boiled. It stains rust brown to the second knuckle, and it holds a scent for a day and a half. And there is exactly one thing anybody has ever boiled it for. Solvay's face did not change, it simply stopped. My sister sent north for her boxes 2 days before the stone was read, said Ilva. Ask her runner, and then ask yourselves why a woman who was about to be named by a stone she could not possibly have known about was already packing. The hall came apart. Solvi went for the side door. She was fast, and she knew the hall, and she had 4 ways out of it that she had certainly counted on her first evening, and every one of them ran to the harbor stair. Ilva had drawn every tread of that stair in her second winter, and she knew the thing nobody who has not measured a building ever knows, which is that the eastern passage doubles back and comes out 4 steps below where a stranger expects it to. She was standing on the landing when her sister came round the turn. Solveig stopped. For one moment the warmth was entirely gone, and what was underneath it looked back at Ilva with their mother's face. Move, said Solveig. No, said Ilva. And behind Solveig, the household of Austri came down the stair. And that was the end of it. Afterward, when the hall had emptied and the writing had been taken, and the councils had gone off to argue in 4 separate rooms, Halvard found her by the cold hearth. You saved me, he said, after everything. You stood up in front of both councils, and I stood up because she lied about a road, said Ilva. I would have done it for a stranger. I have done it for strangers. That is my actual work. Ilva, you want me to say that it was for you. She made herself look at him. It was not. Not tonight. Tonight I was a surveyor, and she was wrong, and I do not let people be wrong about distances. He nodded slowly. He had the grace not to argue, and she wished, violently, that he had argued. The stone was tampered, he said, which means the choosing was void, which means I have spent 6 years. I know what it means. Then let me. No. Her voice was steady, and it cost her more than the hall had. Halvard, you did not answer me. That is the whole of it. Everybody in this business has done something to me, and my sister did the worst of it, and she is the one I am least angry with, because she never once pretended to be on my side. She wrapped her arms around herself. You stood in a hall 90 paces long, and I asked you a question in front of 200 people, and you have had 6 years to send me the answer, and you sent 91 letters that never came. I do not know how to be less angry about that, and I have tried, and I would rather be honest with you than kind. Tell me what to do. Nothing, said Ilva. Go home. Take your crown back off my sister. Be a better king than you were, because you were not a very good one. She swallowed. That is not a punishment. It is only the order things happened in. She left him standing at the cold hearth, and she went up the harbor road in the dark, and she did not look back at that either. Farnholt set the choosing aside at midsummer. It took the council 11 days, and the whole of it turned on a bowl of firethorn root boiled in front of 11 witnesses. And at the end, there was no Queen of Varnholt, and there had never been one. Solveig went north under guard. The letters started in the autumn. They came properly this time into the harbor and up the hill and through the door of the chart house into Ilva's own hand, and she signed the receiving book for every one of them herself, which her apprentices found unaccountably funny. She did not answer them. She read them. She was not a saint. She read every word of every one, sitting on the stool by the stove after the twins were up, and shouting at each other, and then she put them in the 3rd drawer of the north wall, dated on the reverse in her own hand, because she was a creature of method and grief had not changed that. Some of them were the letters a man writes, some of them were not. He wrote to her about a dispute over pension rolls, and asked what she thought, and she found she did think something, and did not write it. He wrote a page about a bridge at the second ford that had been badly sighted for 100 years, and had she ever, in her professional opinion, seen a worse place to put a bridge? She read that one 4 times. Then, in the second month, a letter came addressed to Bram. It was about crabs. It was 3 pages long, and it was serious throughout, and it contained a passably accurate drawing of a crab and an entirely honest admission that the king of Varnholt did not know how many legs they were supposed to have and had asked 2 people who also did not know. It did not mention Ylva. It did not mention anything else at all. After that there were letters for Rilla, about rivers, because Rilla had decided at some point in the autumn that rivers were hers. Dilva read them aloud at the table, because she was not willing to be a woman who withheld a letter, and the irony of that was not lost on her, and she got through the first one, with her voice under control, and had to leave the room at the end of the second. "Who is he?" said Bram the 4th time. "He is the king of Varnholt. I know that. Who is he?" Dilva looked at her son, who had the eyes and did not know what he had, and who was 6 now, and had started asking the sort of question that a 5-year-old does not ask. "He is a man who used to know me," she said, "a long time ago, before you." And Bram accepted this in the manner of somebody filing a receipt. Hesper had opinions. Hesper had always had opinions. "Burn them," she said in the first month. "All of them." By the 3rd month it had moved. "You are reading them twice." "I am not." "You are reading them twice, and then you go and stand in the yard." Hesper set down the kettle. "I am not telling you to forgive him. I would not. I am telling you that you are living in a house with a drawer in it." By the 5th month Odo, who had come out to Austria the year after Hesper and had gone comprehensively native, said the thing at dinner that everybody else had been going around. "He wrote to the boy about crabs," said Odo. "A king? Sat down, wrote 3 pages about crabs, to a child who is not going to write back, and did not mention himself once, and did not mention you. He has no idea whether a single one of those pages gets read. He has been posting them into a hole for 5 months. Odo, I have watched a great many men be sorry," said Odo, "and most of them are sorry at you." In the 7th month the letters stopped. The last one was short. "Ylva, you have been clear, and I have been slow, which has been the shape of us from the beginning. I am going to stop now. Not because I have stopped, but because I have worked out at last that continuing is a way of asking you for something every fortnight for the rest of your life, and you have already told me your answer. And a man who keeps asking after that is not being faithful, he is being loud. The letters to the children will stop, as well, which I am sorrier about than I have any right to be. I did not want them to be a way in. If they were, then I have done the thing I promised myself I would not do, and I would rather lose the crabs than be that. You said I should be a better king than I was. I have been trying. It turns out to be mostly paperwork." She read it twice, and put it in the drawer, and dated it, and closed the drawer, and stood in the yard for a very long time. "This is what you wanted," she told herself. The first fortnight she worked, and worked extremely well. She finished the northern hooks and started the salt flats. Every evening the twins asked whether anything had come, and every evening she said, "No." And by the 4th time they stopped asking, which was worse than the asking. In the 9th month, a rider came up from the harbor at the second bow. Owen was with him. They had spoken perhaps 20 times in a year, carefully, about work, in rooms with other people in them. He had never once come to the chart house. He came to the chart house. "Varnholt has sent to the 4 houses," he said. "Halvard has gone."
"Gone. Off the grounds. Not in his rooms."
"His horse is in the stable, his sword is on its stand, his seal is on the table, and there is a writing appointing his uncle to hold the hall until he returns." Owen's mouth was flat. "That is not a man taken." "A man taken does not stop to write out a regency. That is a man walking away from a crown." Something went through Ylva that she had no name for at all. When? 6 days ago? Nobody knows where. They have sent to every house on this coast, because they have looked in every place a king would be, and he is not in any of them, and now they are frightened. Ilva was already moving. She pushed the salt flats aside and unrolled the pass, and Oven came and stood at her shoulder and had the sense to say nothing. They had looked in every place a king would be. Ilva put her thumb on the border house at Gallows Reach and moved it a little north and west, to the place where the road ran along the wrong side of the fall line, on the wrong bank, exactly as some frightened man in a boat had put it 400 years ago. So that every spring, for 400 years, the second ford turned into a river, and the bridge stood in the stupidest possible place, and she heard a voice in her own north light saying, "In your professional opinion, have you ever seen a worse place to put a bridge?" "Oh," said Ilva. "What? He has not gone anywhere a king would be." She was already reaching for her coat. "He has gone somewhere I would be." She rode out at dawn and made the pass in 3 days because the weather held, and she came up over the fall line in the late afternoon of the 3rd day and stopped her horse and looked down. There were about 40 men on the far bank with a stone boat and 2 sledges and a great deal of very bad scaffolding. They had opened a cut into the north bank on the correct side of the water, and somebody, with no training whatsoever, had staked out a line of poles down the length of it that was, Ilva noted with a professional pain in her chest, almost right. The king of Varnholt was standing in the river to his knees, in a wet shirt, arguing with a mason. She sat on her horse on the ridge for a long moment, then she went down. He did not see her until she was 20 paces away, because he was looking at the water, and when he did see her, he went absolutely still, and the mason said something to him twice and gave up. "Your line is wrong," said Ilva. Halvard did not move. "You have taken it off the shoulder of the hill, instead of the toe," she said, "which means the second ford will still flood, and in about 11 years, the whole of that cut will slump into the river and take your bridge with it. It is a better line than the one it replaces. It is not a good one. Ilva, I am not finished. You have put your spoil on the upstream side. Move it or you will silt your own ford in a season." She got down off the horse because her legs had started to go. 6 days they think you have been taken. Your uncle is holding your hall. I left a writing. You left a writing. She heard her own voice go up. You cannot simply. You are a king. You do not get to disappear into a river valley in a wet shirt because you said the road was in the wrong place, said Halvard. The river went on going past. I have been a king since I was 27, he said. I have been extremely careful. I have never once done anything I could not defend to a council, including the worst thing I ever did, which I defended to a council very well. He was still standing in the water. And you told me to be a better king and go home, and I went home, and I did the paperwork, and it turns out that a great deal of being a good king is deciding which 400-year-old mistake to fix first. So I came and fixed the one you told me about. You did not tell anybody. If I had told anybody, it would have become a gesture, said Halvard. It would have been the king who went to move a road for a woman, and it would have been in every hall on this coast inside a month. And it would have been another thing arriving on your doorstep asking you for something. He looked at her. I did not want to ask you for anything. I wanted the road moved. Those are different, and I have got them the wrong way round for 6 years. Ilva discovered that she was crying, which she had not authorized. You never answered me, she said. I know. 90 paces, in front of 200 people, and I asked you a plain question, and I have carried it for 7 years. Did you ever feel it at all? Halvard came out of the river. He stopped a good distance away, further than he needed to, which she noticed. I have written that answer 91 times, and none of them were any good, he said. So, I will give you the bad one, which is the true one. From the first winter, and I never said it out loud in a room with a door open, because then I would have had to defend it. And I was a coward about that in a way I did not understand until I had lost you. He did not look away. You were right about the relief. That is the part I cannot get past. Not the stone. The relief. You read me like a chart in public, correctly, and you were the only person in all my years of ruling who ever bothered. Ilva stood in the wind on the wrong side of the fall line and let all of it go through her. The line is still wrong, she said. I know it is wrong. I have been telling them it feels wrong for 4 days, and they keep asking me on what grounds. And I have no grounds. I have never surveyed anything in my life. Something desperate and hopeful came up in his face, and he put it down again immediately. And that, more than anything else in 6 years, undid her. I was going to send for a surveyor from the coast. I had got as far as writing the letter. Had you addressed it? No, said Halvard. Ilva looked at the cut, and the poles, and the 40 men on the bank, pretending very hard not to watch. Move your spoil, she said. Off the upstream side, all of it, before the light goes. Then somebody has to walk this whole valley with a cord and stake it properly, which is 3 weeks of work in this weather. And I will want a hut, and my apprentices, and the children, because I am not doing 3 weeks up here without them. Halvard opened his mouth. I have not said yes to anything, said Ilva. I have said the road is wrong, and I am the only person on this coast who can fix it. Ask me again when it is finished, and you will say. Ask me when it is finished, she said, and find out. It took a year and a season in the end, because they moved the ford as well. He asked her at the end of it, standing on his own bridge in the rain, and she made him ask twice, because the river was too loud, and she could not hear him, which he refused to believe for the rest of his life. The twins were 7. They came into the hall at Varnhold at a dead run, arguing, and stopped dead in front of 200 people, and Rilla did the thing with her chin. Owen came for it. He came with 60 riders, and a wagon of nonsense for the children, and he stood on the left of the hearth where the family stands, because the lawkeeper had been perfectly correct, and there is no writing on this coast that can unsay a naming. These are my children, said Owen when the hall asked him, exactly as he had said it once before. They are, said Halvard. And mine? We have discussed it at length and reached a poor compromise that neither of us likes, which I am told is what a treaty is. He is ours as well, said Bram, to nobody in particular, meaning Owen. And the hall laughed, and Ilva put her hand over her mouth. Later, much later, when the lamps were low, Halvard said, 90 paces. What? That is what you walked. To ask me, I have thought about it for 8 years. He turned her hand over in his. I would like the record to show that I came 400 miles and stood in a river. The record is mine, said Ilva. I will decide what it shows.